Did you know that 50% of mental illness begins by age 14 and 75% of mental illness begins by age 24? Mental health is most definitely teen health. One Mind has a program called Aspire that's dedicated to mental health treatments for young adults. And when we want NAMI and One Mind to continue the great work they do to help so many millions of people with struggles, we need to donate and help them out and support them. Please go to styt.org/donate. Coming up, we have K-Camp, Lauren Waregi, and Elohim. Up now, we have an award-winning actress who is also a PhD in neuroscience. So, she's not busy at all. The actress and doctor in question is MAYIM BIALIK.
Hello!
Hey,
How are you?
I'm hanging in there. How are you?
Same as you, hanging in there. Where are you in the world?
I live in Los Angeles. I'm in Studio City. This is my house, and I've pretty much been here for a long time now, not really going anywhere. So I'm really in my house.
Hey, you know what? This time has been incredibly crazy. I know me and my friends have just been trying to do a bunch of like Zoom and FaceTime calls so we can keep in contact with each other. Have you been able to do the same?
Um, you know, funny you should ask. I think that what's going on now weighs very differently on everyone, and everyone has their own kind of way that they're making sense of it. And I will say that for those of us who struggle with mental health issues, this situation has brought up some things, that maybe we didn't expect. And one of the things that's happened for me is that this kind of social interaction, like through Zoom and through FaceTime, does not feel as fulfilling as the interactions that I've had before. So I'm definitely doing it. Like I'm trying, I'm suiting up and showing up, as we say, and I'm acting as if, but it's definitely different. I'm also an introvert. I live my life as an extrovert, and I'm an actor, and I live in the public sphere, but I actually am an introvert. So a lot of this feels really comfortable because I love not leaving my house or, having to see anyone or talk to anyone. No, but I definitely am missing a lot of authentic interaction that really surprised me. Honestly, I've been very surprised by a lot of things that I've done in this time, or ways that I've reacted that I hadn't anticipated.
I definitely feel that way too. A lot of people are pretty surprised when I say I'm introverted, and I'm all for staying home. I'm excited about it. But I did notice a big difference about like willingly staying home versus being
Right.
told that you have to stay home. I noticed that made me feel really anxious because then suddenly it was like, oh, wait a minute, that something that I find freedom in is now flipped 180. So it's been kind of interesting.
The way that I kind of have been thinking about it is like, they say you need to experience darkness to see light. That we only see light when we compare it to darkness. And I feel like for me, a lot of my light comes from being by myself and having that time to regroup and to do self-care and to do the things that maintain my mental health. But without the darkness, of interacting with people so that I remember why I don't want to do that all the time.
Yeah, I felt that in my chest. Now, something that I noticed on your Instagram was how open you are with sharing your mental health. I'm curious, how did it feel, I guess, sharing that with the world? Because I know that social media sometimes can feel like a scary place, but as soon as I was able to kind of crack that door open, there was a lot of love that came in, and it actually felt really good. So I was curious about your experiences.
Yeah, well, first of all, I really appreciate, you putting yourself out there. And, I've been really inspired by like people like Will Wheaton, who I'm friends with and friendly with and have worked with for years, who also really made me feel comfortable about saying like, it's okay to not feel okay. So I've really been inspired by other people, and even, some of the biggest A-list celebrities, that have talked about their struggles with mental health. I admire those people. And also what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another. So I think it's also really tempting to be like, here's my thing that I have a problem with, and this is the thing that I did to make it better, and you should do it too, and then we'll all feel better. And I think a lot of times, like social media or even regular media, it gets very shiny with like, this celebrity who's very attractive and has their life together, like struggled with mental health and they did this and now they're better. And like, that's not my story. My story is that for the rest of my life, every single day, I get to wake up and say, I don't want this to take over. I don't want this to become the dominant pain of my day. There have been times in my life when I've been on medication, when I've not been on medication. So I think that's also part of the scary thing is like, I don't want to put myself out there as I've figured it out because I haven't, you know, there are things that I know to do and there are ways that I know to get out of certain psychiatric states. But this is my life. This is my life. And this is the reality for many, 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 many people all over the world.
There have been so many, and I know social media sometimes can be a little bit of a wonky place, and sometimes that can hold a lot of negativity. But what I've noticed, especially when it comes to mental health, is pretty much what you mentioned earlier on, that when people kind of go up there and are vulnerable and they share their story, it makes me feel confident and comfortable to share my story as well. But also I'm inspired by them and I relate to that, and it makes me feel like I'm not alone. So again, kind of going back to everything that you're saying, it's going to help a lot of people. It's making myself feel like it's covered in a very warm blanket. So
but I think you hit on something that that social media really has helped us to bridge this notion of making the world smaller, you know, in such healthy ways. It's things like that. It's being able to see people and like scroll through and say like, I'm not alone. Whereas for those of us who grew up without social media, without even computers, the sense of isolation was tremendous. And I think that while there are so many potentially problematic or negative things about the way some people use social media, this and in particular the way that I've seen NAMI also utilize social media has really shown like this can be used as a force for good. This can be used as healthy reminders for self-care, reminders to get help, and also just the distribution of information, that we have hotlines now that people can reach out to. We have no cost services that we can access. That's a place where social media can disseminate that information. That's incredibly important.
Absolutely. And that's what NAMI is doing is so important, and why it's so important to support them. We're asking people to give whatever they can to this important organization. And I'm glad that it's a conversation that we're able to talk about now. I mean, hearing that you didn't grow up with computers, I don't really know how I would function without it. I'm like, what do you mean?
Like, it's funny because, you know, like when we would date people, there were no cell phones. We would like leave notes on campus on bulletin boards, like, hey, want to meet me for coffee? And then you would say like, check the bulletin board and I'll leave you a message of where we're going to meet. Like, that's how everybody functioned.
But that's so sweet.
Oh, it was super sweet.
I love that. Okay, so I'm going to shift the gears a little bit. You have a PhD in neuroscience. You do, which is incredible. So now I wanted to know, what is the most common question that you get when people hear that about you? Because I'm sure that that's a topic that's probably brought up a lot. I am inspired by that. I'm mind blown. So I would like to know.
So there's different categories of questions. You know, I'm the kind of person who, like, if I'm at like, well, back when we used to go outside and go to if I've been asked like literally at like cocktail parties, like, my grandfather has Parkinson's and this is the type of nucleotide deletion that he has. Am I going to get it too? And it's like, if the answer was yes, I'm not going to tell you at a cocktail party. Like, that's weird. People often say like, oh my God, you must be so smart, which I appreciate. But I like to point out that getting a doctorate, especially in the sciences, is often a lot more about persistence than about intelligence, just because the process is so crazy. And it's kind of like with medical school, you like know the classes you have to take and the things you have to do. With a PhD, you have to come up with your own line of research, and it's really like a free-for-all.
It sounds like that added a lot of color to your life. So, I mean,
I'm a real hoot.
Oof, I commend you for that. There's a lot of persistence in that, which I'm sure a lot of people don't see. So, chef's kiss. Going ahead and wrapping up a bit with just one last question. How can teens like me stay mentally healthy even with some negative influences that might be around us?
Um, oh, I think
Such
that
a broad topic. I know. I'm sorry.
no, I mean it's like I hate to sound like a parent, and the fact is this isn't parent advice. This is actually, the advice that organizations like NAMI are helping us distribute and integrate into our lives. Um, things like sleep and self-care, learning a meditative practice has been one of the most important components of my mental health. Um, and I use a free, app that literally has guided meditations. I put in the amount of time I want, which is usually 5 to 15 minutes. And I force myself to not do a million things at once and to sit. And we know that that lowers our blood pressure. It regulates our heart. It's one of the healthiest things that I have learned to practice, which is important for mental health. Things like diet are very, very important. We know that they are. And having some boundaries around negative information coming in has been extremely important for me. I cannot read the news the way I used to. And I used to read the news kind of throughout the day, and I felt horrible, and I would ruminate, and that tape would start playing in my head of all the horrible things. I would end up turning that feeling into not liking myself. Like it just, this train would start going in my head and I couldn't stop it. And what I realized is while I wish I wasn't the kind of person who takes that kind of information and turns it against myself, that is the person that God made me. That's the person that I am. So I get to say, what are the ways that I can limit that so that I don't have to turn it on myself? And I have plenty of opportunities to beat myself up over other things, but limiting the amount of information that was coming in, which was creating anxiety for me, has been really helpful, because now I just get to deal with life on life's terms and not necessarily the world's problems, which I internalize and make my problem. That's also been really, really helpful. Physical exercise, extremely important. When you're depressed, it's really hard. Believe me, I know. But even walking for 5 minutes, getting out of the physical place that I'm in can be really, really helpful. And finally, having support. I'm a strong advocate of classical psychotherapy. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy. I've done trauma therapy. I've done all the therapies. I also
I fall into all those categories.
I believe in alternative treatments, which they're not really alternative. Eastern traditions have known about acupuncture, meditation. I like essential oils. When I put on lavender, it makes me feel calm. So I do a lot of supplemental things as well to try and boost my mood and maintain my mood. Not so that I'm happy and perky and smiling all the time. That's also not my job. But just so that I can function at a level that allows me to take in life on life's terms, and to be present for my children and present for myself.
Well, I think a lot of viewers, including myself, can learn so much from everything that you just said. Thank you for sharing such a sweet and wonderful part of your brain with all of us.
And thank you for facilitating this and for being part of this. And, I actually have used NAMI's services. That's actually how I got involved with NAMI. I had a family member who was hospitalized many years ago, and I started learning how to be of service to that loved one through NAMI, and eventually started using the services for myself as well. So I'm not only an ambassador, I'm an actual client of NAMI. So it's really a pleasure to be here and to share with you.
So great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mental health is stepping out of the shadows and into the spotlight.
I need help.
Can you talk?
Struggling.
I'm here.
Depressed. Can't sleep.
But we need the science and solutions to change lives. Now, more than ever, we are in this fight together. We are of one mind. Accelerating brain health for all. Help us fund new treatments at onemind.org.